to welcome everyone to the District 5 Candidate Forum for Salt Lake City Council for the election that's happening this fall. I'm Jason Stevenson, the co-chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization. 5 community councils organize this event: Liberty Wells, Ballpark, Central 9th, Wasatch Hollow, and ELPCO. Our role is to help Salt Lake City residents stay informed and go to events and about important events in their community. And this debate is one way that we fulfill that mission. I encourage you to check out your local Salt Lake City Community Council if you haven't done so already. And we couldn't be holding this event without the cooperation and assistance of the Salt Lake Community College, who is sponsoring this debate from this incredible space here at their South City campus off 17th South. I especially want to thank Scott Brown from the Local Government Relations Office, and also Leif Erickson, Guy Doros, Will Pollard, and John Hurst for setting up the room and making all this technology work tonight, at least so far. Our ability to broadcast this event via Zoom webinar is also due to the support we received from the Salt Lake City Public Library. And I especially want to thank Patrick Hutchins and ELPCO Campos, who is actually managing the webinar that many of you are watching right now. Lastly, I want to encourage our online audiences to participate in this debate. You might be far away, but you can still join what's happening here. You can email questions to 2021 SLC District 5 at gmail.com or text them to the phone number 801-810-8495. We have people standing by to field those questions and relay them to the moderator. And that moderator is Benjamin Wood, an award-winning journalist and podcast host who now is the news editor of Salt Lake City Weekly. Ben will be moderating tonight's debate, and I'm inviting him to the podium so that we can begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you to the residents of District 5 here in person or watching online for joining us today. The election, as Jason said, is a little over a month away. 5 of our neighbors have stepped up to represent the Ballpark, Wasatch Hollow, East Liberty Park, Liberty Wells, and Central 9th neighborhoods. Those candidates include our current councilman, Darin Mano, and challengers Sarah Reale, George Chapman, Amy Hawkins, and Vance Hansen. Campaigns are hard work, and whichever of these 5 citizens is successful will be rewarded with one of the most thankless jobs that exists. So please join me in a brief round of applause for our candidates. A quick word on the format before we begin. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to provide an opening statement, followed by a series of questions for which each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Candidates have been asked to limit their use of rebuttals, but are also permitted to respond if they are directly mentioned in another person's answer. I also reserve the right as moderator to interrupt at any time and move on. Following the questions, each candidate will be given another 2 minutes to make a final closing statement. The questions for tonight's debate were submitted by the community councils of District 5, as well as residents in the district. To reiterate our host's invitation, those listening to the debate are encouraged to submit questions during the event by emailing 2021slcdistrict5 at gmail.com or by texting 801-810-8495. For either method, please include your first and last name. To the candidates, your constituents are listening in good faith to determine which of you to support in November. I urge you to respect their time and to answer their questions directly, thoughtfully, and succinctly. Without further ado, let's begin with our opening statements, starting with Sarah Reale.
I actually might hold this because it has a little bit weaker signal. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here digitally and in person. My name is Sarah Reale, and when I started this campaign, I decided to walk every street in the district. I wasn't canvassing, I was just walking and learning and seeing the district at eye level. It took me about 40 days and I walked over 86 miles. So if you live in the district, I have walked down your street. Walking the district showed me a lot. I realized how incredible our community is. Campaigning, meeting everyone has just made me love the city more. We also live in a beautiful place with access to mountains, and I noticed a lot of our district is walkable and bikeable, which I love as a cyclist. I saw the opportunity for ways for us to grow to keep Salt Lake City the special place that we all love. I grew up here, and I care a lot about how we grow. I also saw plenty of room for improvement. Broken sidewalks, cars not following speed limits, people without homes, and unsafe biking conditions. I've heard many folks talk about leaving because they don't like how we've changed. Let's get real. I'm a gay Italian educator who has 3 younger sisters, and I was in a sorority. I don't run away from when I see challenges. I hit them head on. I also look to people, because with an engaged community, we can plan for growth with purpose, tackle complex issues, and find creative solutions together. And that's why I'm running. I'm running for you, to work with you, to work for you. The disconnect between the representative and the people is getting wider and wider. And that's the opposite of how democracy is supposed to work. What if you finally felt heard? What if you had a voice? Well, I'm running to represent you, to listen, to collaborate, to be an advocate. I see you, I hear you, and I've walked your street. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Vance Hansen, if you could go next.
Thank you. I'm more comfortable out actually doing the job than I am in the courtroom. I wonder how it got to be an officer that way, but I managed. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. My parents graduated from the South High before they turned it into the community college. I believe that everybody from all walks of life, if they meet the requirements, should be able to participate in their community and run for office. Talent lays in many unusual places. Sometimes it's not very likely, but it is there. I was in the Youth Committee Council in high school. The program was run by Senator Hatch. I was in the police cadets in West Valley. To some people, that's a very bad word because they don't like the West Valley officers for some reason. Of course, everybody likes to know the police are around until they see the red and blue lights. I was a teacher's aide under my grandmother. I was in the foster parent program under my grandmother. I was a volunteer animal control officer for a lot of different cities. I was a deputy constable in the Murray precinct and a deputy constable in the in the sheriff's office. I worked at Rings, Shopko's, Walmart's. I ran for District 5 in 2017, and as a state senator in 2018 for District 2. My goals is to try to make it easier to vote and bring faith back to our government. I thank you.
Thank you. Amy Hawkins.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
You might want to pull it in front of you a little bit
All
more.
right, thank you. How about now? Better? Great, thank you. Thanks to the organizers and thanks to those listening in now and later. The most valuable thing that you can give your community is your time and attention. My name is Amy J. Hawkins, and I live in the western part of District 5 in the Ballpark neighborhood. That means I get to watch bees fireworks from my own backyard. I moved to Salt Lake City 10 years ago to work for the University of Utah, and I have a PhD in genetics. My day job is being a full-time faculty member at the medical school. Because I'm a scientist and a medical educator, I view our city's policies and problems through the lens of scientific thinking and public health. I love looking at a chart or a graph and thinking about what is that going to mean for me and my neighbors in our city. I'm not anything like a fifth-generation Utahn. I come from an extended military family that's lived all over the United States and on bases in Germany, so none of us are ever going to be fifth-generation anything. But what my family does have in common is a commitment to public service, whether it's being a public school teacher or a diplomat for the State Department, or being a weather forecaster in the Air Force. I'm running for city council because I'm really concerned about public safety in our neighborhoods, because I'm good at community level engagement. And I like working on big problems with my neighbors, and I like getting results. And I do have a track record of success for our community in getting funding. One, $500,000 for bike and sidewalk improvements and street crossings on Kensington Avenue. Two, getting funding and developing educational resources for Utah high school students about opioids, because Salt Lake City's homelessness crisis is also a crisis of addiction. And three, maybe most relevant tonight, because I've been on the board of the Ballpark Community Council since 2016 and run it since 2018. Tonight gives us the best parts of a ballpark meeting, the chance to engage about stuff we're really excited about in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. George Chapman.
I'm George Chapman, and the reason I'm running is because I want my city council to stop defunding the police. I'm a retired engineer. I go to most of the city council meetings and community council meetings in District 5. I also write a local news blog at georgechapman.net. I am disappointed in my city council because we lack 100 officers that are unable to answer 911 calls. That has resulted in over 50 calls to 911 on hold at times. That's unsatisfactory. I'm also running because I want more housing built in Salt Lake City. 80% of this city's property or land is not allowed to have housing. That's tens of thousands of acres that is not allowed to have housing. Instead of going for building housing on that property, the city council seems to want to increase zoning or density in single-family home areas that constitute only 12% of the property of the city. That doesn't make sense. I'm also running because I want to stop the city council from ignoring the drug dealing and drug use in parks and around schools. I want the city council to insist that the jail accept arrested drug dealers and to actually incarcerate them. I want the city council to allow drug dogs at the shelters, and I want the city council to stop fighting the walking police patrols in parks that are recommended. I also want to increase air quality, and I want to stop the city from changing roads that increase pollution. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, George. Councilman Mano.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to the organizers of this debate. I'm honored to share space with these other candidates, and I'm excited to talk about Salt Lake City and District 5 tonight. I want to share a story with you. If any of you have seen my campaign flyer this year, you may have seen a picture of me standing in front of the Japanese market on Main Street and Kensington Avenue. And I want to tell you tonight why that location is so important to me. When my grandparents were forced to leave California during World War II, they first had to burn any things that could connect them too closely to Japan. So they literally burned family heirlooms and photographs. Then they packed up their truck and drove here to Salt Lake City. The silver lining to this story is that even though most of the nation saw my family as a threat and treated them as less than human, they found people here in Salt Lake City who had the kindness and character to help them rebuild their lives. Now, fast forward a few decades, and my grandmother found a job making bento boxes at that same Japanese market on Kensington Avenue and Main Street. She would bring home treats and candies from her shifts, and she would share them with me and my siblings. And so the literal first taste of my own heritage came from that market right here in District 5. I'm motivated to serve Salt Lake City because I know that that kindness and character still exists in our community. I've seen it all year long as I've been knocking doors and connecting with constituents. And I try to emulate that kindness and character as I make decisions as your city council member. Now, I took office at a historically bad time, but notwithstanding the calamities of 2020, I supported financial assistance for small businesses, artists, food servers, undocumented families, and people in need of rent and mortgage assistance. I protected our children by extending the mayor's mask mandates. And in the midst of all this, I kept the city running and used my experience as an architect and urban designer to prepare Salt Lake City for the bright future that I know is ahead of us. Thank you again for the organizers of this debate, and I'm excited to talk about the issues and the opportunities that are facing Salt Lake City and District 5.
Thank you. Thank you all. For our first question, the topic that was most frequently raised by the community councils and our constituent questioners was regarding crime. This specific question comes from the Central Ninth Community Council. Many parts of District 5 have begun to feel particularly lawless. Residents and businesses regularly see open criminal and drug activity. What should the City Council be doing to improve the situation, and do you believe they currently are doing it? We'll start with Vance Hansen, go down the table, and end with Sarah Reale.
I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I've been an operational officer. I haven't achieved the rank of Category 1, but I've been trained. Now, as far as that, you need to kind of look to the past is what I believe. They used to have a city marshal's office. They've converted that more towards ordinance enforcement, animal control, taken away the authority. Now, also, it goes into territorial fight. The constables years ago were forced out of office by the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. There's room for both types of officers. Also, the city has done away with programs that have existed, and they've denied that they've existed. But they could have the officers if they were willing to commit to their words. The moment anybody mentions lawsuit, then they drop a program that's working and immediately say it's no good. I think they ought to revisit the past to see. There's a lot of ways we could get around it now. The other night I stuck my foot in my mouth over at the police department. You cannot pay a policeman what they're worth. But if there's no money in the budget, you can't hire the officers at the same time. That's where the reserve program comes in. I'm sorry if I'm not an eloquent speaker, but that's the best way to put it. Thank you.
I really appreciate this question because as a resident of the Ballpark community, I regularly see examples of lawlessness go by my front window. I've been teaching from home for the past year and a half, and it's a constant parade of things that are both sad and threatening to see. When we think about what police officers really value in terms of support, their number one concerns are typically salaries and retirement. Retirement benefits are a state level issue, but we can certainly serve as a voice to support reinstating retirement benefits to what they once were. And I would be happy to serve as that voice of support. I know that we, as a city, I know that the City Council this year did support a major salary increase for our Salt Lake Police Department of about 30% for starting officers, and I think that was necessary. We know that if that hadn't happened, we would have seen a further exodus of an additional 50 officers. It's frightening to think about what the city would be like if we were short 150 officers rather than 100. Priority 1 response times right now are 17 minutes and 35 seconds long, and that's going to have a real impact when we hear gunshots outside our homes, which happens to me and my neighbors. I wish that the 30% salary increase brought everybody back to the Salt Lake Police Department, and unfortunately it didn't. I think we're going to have to find other ways, non-superficial ways to support hires. We can waive take-home fees for Salt Lake police cars, for example, which would allow their cars to be in our communities and not just in the basement of the police building. Thank you for your time.
What a question. That's why I'm running. I want more police on the street. I believe that the biggest deterrent to threat, criminal threat, is police, a visible police officer. That's one of the reasons why the administration recommended visible police walking patrols through the parks. Jefferson Park around Central 9th is part of the problem. we need police walking patrols. The city council doesn't like that idea because some demographics in the city are intimidated by police in uniform. In my opinion, it's a sad commentary on our society if the first experience a kid has with a cop is during a criminal investigation. Kids should see cops walking in the parks. They should be accessible. This is part of community policing. Another part of the problem with Salt Lake City policing is the Salt Lake City Council refuses to push the county to accept arrested drug dealers. So the criminal element gets out almost immediately. When the scrap metal dealer calls the police department and says, we have a catalytic converter thief here, the Salt Lake City Police Department doesn't have enough personnel to go get him. They say, we can't do anything. That's how bad it is right now. We need over 120 new officers with experience, and it's going to take us a decade to get there. A decade. That's unsatisfactory. You want to lower crime in the area, we need to start stopping the defunding of police. We need to accept the police deserve better respect, and we need to tell the county to keep the people that are threats to society and to the homeless, keep them in jail. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for the question, Ben. I'm raising 4 kids in the Ballpark neighborhood, just a few houses from Jefferson Park, and so I see this problem on the streets every day, and I understand it, and I hear my neighbors when they tell me about the public safety concerns they have. I do want to clear up a couple things. The Salt Lake City Council did not defund the police. We just, as Amy said, supported the largest police salary to the tune of $5 million if that police department has ever had in history. And we have also been not just looking at police, but we've been looking at other ways to support public safety in our neighborhoods. We added medical response teams to the fire department. We added more social workers to the police department so that they're not only available during business hours, but 24 hours a day. We allocated $2 million for a civilian response model so that low-level and non-criminal crimes could be responded to by somebody that's not necessarily a sworn police officer. We've funded expansion of the Downtown Ambassador program and have looked to doing more of that. And we're meeting with our new 911 communications director to look at innovations within Dispatch 911 that can help with the problems of public safety that we see on our streets. We don't just need more police, we need a larger spectrum of services. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and I want the city to be fully equipped with a full tool bag of resources to create public safety in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Excuse me, since I was mentioned by name, may I?
Could we let Sarah speak first and then we can
Yes,
take some
thank you.
rebuttals?
Okay, great.
Thanks. And thank you for this question. This is something that I know comes up often in a lot of conversations that we've been having across the city. And I'm sure, like most of you, there are a few people in the city that have found themselves without having their car being broken into. And that's happened to me from everywhere from the Avenues to Holiday. The reality is that we're in a crisis with a staff shortage. We need to hire more officers, and without the amount of staff needed to fully patrol and monitor the city, we're never going to see crime rates go down. We also need to think of how we are looking at the data and priority of calls while we do have a staff shortage. In addition, as an educator, I can relate to the being a public employee. The pay often doesn't work out as well as it should for the work that you're doing. We've all lost great teachers to other careers because they want higher pay. Similar things happen in the police force. It's a hard job, and if we're not paying them well, it's going to be hard to recruit and it's going to be hard to retain these officers. So it's something we need to look at, and I'm grateful for the city council raising the wage for 30%. We also need to look at innovative ways, community support, and possibly looking into maybe rebates for residents to get safety equipment at their house as well, everything from floodlights to cameras. It can be a deterrent. It doesn't stop crime, but it can be a deterrent. I think that if we look into the funding, prioritize reimagining policing with mental health officers and new innovative ways to look at how we don't spread the staff fully thin and we keep them at capacity with benefits and salary that are worthwhile for them, that we can help fight crime in the city.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, Amy. Go ahead and take 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that Darin mentioned other forms of support that our neighborhoods can have in terms of, for example, downtown ambassadors. However, before the community can really be sold on that, we need to see the data about the effects that these social workers, downtown ambassadors, and others are having on our public safety. Are they truly having an effect? Are they reducing violent crime in our communities? Violent crime statistics have not gone down in our communities this year. We need other solutions too.
Does anyone else care to take a rebuttal? Yes, George, 30 seconds.
I think I just wasted 10 seconds. The city council claimed to defund the police last year. They publicized defunding the police, and they said they were going to do it some more. Even last week, they defunded the police by a legislative intent that redefined public safety as social workers and non-emergency traffic enforcement. That's defunding the police. We need 200 more officers. Even the chief of police, June 1st, said we need a lot more officers.
Councilman?
Thanks, Ben. I do want to clarify that I'm not saying we don't need more police. We absolutely need to rehire the police officers that we have lost, and we need to look at adding more police officers if that's necessary. But again, we do need to look at a full spectrum of services, not only one tool in the toolbox.
Thank you all. Staying on the topic for one more question, this comes from the East Liberty Park Community Council. What do you believe the relationship is between crime and people experiencing homelessness? And what do you propose the city can do to address both issues? We'll start with Amy Hawkins, and we'll finish with Vance Hansen for this question.
I wish that our communities saw no relationship between unsheltered encampments and crime. And unfortunately, that has not been our experience in the Ballpark community. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to watch an encampment across the street from a school exist for months on end and watch people openly smoking meth. That's not something that should happen at any point in time. However, I think the more detrimental effect of the encampments on our communities is that it allows criminals to hide in open sight. We constantly see cars pulling up, dealing drugs, and then leaving. And this is occurring in our communities quite frequently. And we also see it happening behind family homes, and we see people we've seen people trying to convince young children to go around and open their front doors and let them into their families' homes. I know these are isolated incidents, but they are very real, and they are going to drive families out of our communities. We need to do something. We have to change our policy regarding encampments. They're having a detrimental effect on our communities, particularly on the western side of District 5.
Thank you. George?
Okay. Some of the homeless are definitely out there doing drugs, and drug users aren't generally committing victimless crimes. But about half of, in my opinion, about half the homeless out there are there because they're trying to avoid the drugs in the shelter. The last shelter audit recommended drug dogs because it said the shelters are full of drugs. So if you don't want to go to drugs, you have to go camp out. And of course, the drug dealers and drug users are embedding themselves and victimizing the homeless that actually want a safe place to sleep. This city council refuses to implement and have a safe parking and camping area, which would allow enforcement of the anti-camping ordinance. And here's how bad the police issue is. We do not have enough police officers to go with our social workers that we're trying to hire. We need police officers to go with them, but the police chief says we don't have enough cops to do that. That's how bad it is. Do the homeless cause some of the crime? Yes, but it's probably, in my opinion, because of the system that will not keep the actual criminal element locked up in county jail. These are criminals that shouldn't get out with their own recognizance. But every day they're on the street, they're stealing a bicycle. And even catalytic converter thieves are out within a day. That's how bad it is. It's not the homeless, it's the system, and our city council refuses to change it.
Ben, I'm really glad that you asked this question. This is important. I want to be clear that I do understand that homelessness and crime coexist in the same spaces, but people experiencing homelessness or addiction are not criminals. We need to stop treating them like they are and labeling them as less than human. We need to refocus and remember the kindness and character that does exist in our community. And that's what I've heard from constituents all year long as I've talked to them about these important issues on the doorsteps. Homelessness is a regional problem. People experiencing homelessness come from all over the state, and we need a regional response. People experiencing homelessness are not a monolith, and again, just like public safety, we need a variety of solutions. The problems that exist with people experiencing homelessness are not that people are living on our streets. The problem is that the system has allowed human beings to go without the basic human rights of shelter, healthcare, and food security. The solution to the problem is further investing in housing, education, mental health, addiction recovery services, vocational training, and food security. Most of those things are actually responsibilities of the county, state, or federal government. But at the municipal level, that looks like continuing to support affordable housing projects within our city, reforming our old zoning laws that have driven prices up and led to entrenched inequality in neighborhoods, and continuing to work with our partners at the nonprofit community and within other levels of government to provide the real services and real solutions that human beings need to get out of the problems associated with poverty and addiction. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate this question. And as I'm thinking about how to respond, I really want to separate the crime and the unsheltered population that we're seeing in our city, because I really think that it is an unfortunate situation, but a lot of the crime, I use the example of when my truck got broken into. It's been broken into a million times, but one time it got broken into and they just stole something that was of value. And the next time it got broken into, everything was stolen. And I thought, okay, the first person that broke into my truck was definitely looking for things of value to sell, possibly for drugs or other items. The other person, maybe they needed my old soccer blanket that was in the back seat. They clearly just needed things. And so I really like to separate those two issues. But if we are talking about people without homes, it's just an unfortunate public health issue that's impacting our city. People have reached out to me with this same concern, and I like separating, there's two people in this situation. There's the people that live here and the people without homes. And there's no way for us to find solution without resources. This should be a funding priority for the city for the foreseeable future. There are obvious service gaps that will only get wider without support from our city, but we need a multifaceted approach. We should look to public health experts, better comprehensive data collection, case management, and develop a unified agenda and vision within the whole region to tackle this. Most importantly, these issues are systemic. We need to change as a community and address the lack of support of mental health, addiction recovery, to provide more opportunities for individuals to succeed in society. There's no perfect solution to this issue, but I'm willing to bring people together and solve this complex problem.
Thank you. And Vance, if you could, I've been told we're having a hard time hearing you on the stream. If you could kind of eat the microphone a little bit. Thank you.
That a little better.
Sure.
I think we're all saying the same thing, got the same goals, but we're just using different language to get there. Unfortunately, people don't like to be told that they're wrong. I know how they feel because they tell me I've been wrong a lot of times. It's real easy for the people that are breaking the law to hide in the homeless population. So I do think we need multiple different people going in. The police to calm the situation down. The social workers to handle what the police are not trained or undertrained in doing. Now, people have a tendency just to look at the police and say, you're the problem to the situation. The truth is justice is a double-edged sword. You could tell the truth and still get in trouble for it and be put in jail. How that's happening is a failure of the government, the people that are supposed to be representing them. For some reason, it's flipped around, and you could steal an election honestly or dishonestly and not be breaking the law. But people like to think that, I know what's going on, when really they're just trying to hang on to the situation. That's what I'm basing my program, or my campaign on, is being able to tell and keep your word. Thank you.
Thank you. George, I see you're requesting a rebuttal. I would warn you, you've used 2 now, just so you know.
I don't understand.
You have 3 to use for the night, unless you're named specifically by another
This
candidate.
is the second one.
Correct.
Good enough. Okay, I just want to remind the video watchers that this city council refused to implement a convenient, secure storage system that would allow homeless to work and start getting out of poverty and homelessness. Also, the city council refuses to use ARPA funds that are available for putting every single homeless person in either a motel or some kind of housing. This city council is actually the problem.
Does that count as being named?
I'm going to count it as being named, yes. Feel free to take 30 seconds, Councilman.
Thank you, George. We do have a program called A Place for Your Stuff, but I agree that it needs improvement. And we have been using a lot of our ARPA money to fund homeless services. And we will continue to have that discussion. None of those things that were just discussed are things that have ever been officially brought to me for a vote. So they're not things that I have refused to fund. They are ideas that have not come yet to the city council level. But absolutely, I am 100% interested in using our ARPA funding to help solve homelessness.
Thank you. Anyone else care to take a rebuttal at this question? Okay, great. We'll take a question from our constituents. This is from Russ Askren. He says, I've been a resident of District 5 for 16 years. In that time, it seems like councilpersons have focused mostly on citywide and statewide issues. Name one thing you would advocate for and work to make happen that specifically focuses on life in District 5. We'll start with George and we'll come around to Amy Hawkins.
Oh, the first thing I'd focus on is probably streets. I get the impression that this city council wants to prioritize streets for bicyclists, and I think that's wrong. 83%, according to the last survey, want to use cars and use cars for most of their transportation needs. If we're going to do road diets like the proposed road diet on 21st South, that'll increase pollution, congestion, and drive traffic through quiet adjacent streets. That affects life of everybody in this city, and that's a problem. So I think anything the city council can do that's going to negatively impact the constituents and life in the city is wrong. The other issues, of course, are public safety. Public safety is a priority. It affects everybody's life. I know a lot of people who've had break-ins in their car 3 or 4 times, and they just give up. The police aren't coming. They do the report, but it doesn't matter. So they stop responding. The reports for drug use have actually gone down 50% in the last 5 years. That's because people are tired of calling and getting no response. That's a public safety issue. It's a police issue, and that's a problem. Those are my comments.
I do support bike lanes, and I do support redesigning our streets to be better equipped for pedestrians, bicyclists, and for people of all modalities. And I think that the 2 biggest and most impactful projects that could happen in District 5 are Main Street and State Street. If we could redesign those to create better safety, add street trees, add additional forms of transportation, and make it easier and safer to travel through those streets on bicycle and on foot, we will encourage better economic development, small businesses will be supported, and the neighborhoods surrounding those streets will flourish and thrive.
Great question. I love this question. It made me start thinking about my favorite walk that I take with my dogs, which is I walk from my house down to the Streusel Bakery and then over to Watchtower Coffee. And it makes me realize how much I love the ballpark and how much I love my neighborhood becoming so walkable and community oriented. And I think that there's a lot of potential in Ballpark specifically. For me, it's thinking about also bike lanes and Main Street becoming a major bikeway. I think that that has a lot of potential. I use it often on my bike, and I think that it has a wide enough road that we can develop some great bike lanes there on Main Street, as well as State Street reimagined. A lot of people have reached out to me, what are you gonna do about State Street if you're elected? And I think that State Street has a lot of potential, and it's been ignored for a long time, specifically State Street within our district from 21st South to 9th South. I think that there are plans in place, and if we can follow through, it's just something I would want to push for, is really looking to reimagine State Street as being a safer, easier space to walk and bike and visit all the local businesses that are there. So yeah, I'd really focus on Ballpark if I were to plan things specifically for District 5.
Thanks, Sarah. Vance, Hansen, go ahead.
I think what it boils down to is people don't prioritize things properly. I'm a great believer in education, that you can't build safe schools unless you got enough police or different kind of police or social workers, whatever it is that you need. You have to work on budget. If there's not much money going around, naturally you're not going to have the proper amount of people that you need. My grandfather has always taught me, and probably his father teaching him, is that the most important condition is your benefits. If you're just doing things for the money, because you can't afford to pay a teacher what you owe them. You can't afford to pay a mother or a parent what you owe them. What I mean by going back to the past is you could repay them in kind. If you don't have money, give them food, whatever you got. Give them help. I don't know how to put it eloquently, but that's the best, only way I know how.
Thank you. Amy, Hawkins, and if you could also speak a little more directly into your microphone, we're having a hard time hearing you as well.
What happens if I pick it up?
Even better.
Awesome. Okay. So one thing that's specific to District 5, I've already described how I wrote a grant for the Kensington Avenue Byway and got $500,000 for our neighborhood, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. What am I going to talk about that's specific to District 5? I would continue to push back on the Brooklyn Avenue Homeless Overflow Shelter. Currently, we know it's a detox center that's run by the Volunteers of America. As soon as we heard that the Utah Homelessness Council had made a decision to change the use of that detox center to create a low barrier overflow shelter, yet another homeless resource in the Ballpark neighborhood. As soon as I heard, I texted about 50 people I knew that night, including a developer, George Hauser, who had 238 units of affordable housing planned for that same block of Brooklyn Avenue. Did the folks who planned for an overflow shelter know that? I don't know, because there was no community outreach. So what I also did was organize, and I held a community meeting with 100 participants and elected officials from the Ballpark and Central Ninth communities. So far, this has been the only community outreach on a homeless shelter in our neighborhood. So yes, what would I do specific to District 5? I would continue transparent process. I would push for zoning changes, create oversight in this process currently where there is none. Because currently, any district that has general commercial zoning can have a shelter placed in it without any public engagement to the community, and without any oversight. Thank you.
That's going to be your last one, George. Let's just say your name.
That's okay.
All right, 30 seconds.
I'm an old bicyclist, and I don't think this city actually knows what they're doing with respect to bicycling. These separated bike lanes on Main Street are useless. They're only cleaned every 7 weeks. That's not a good separated bike lane. And we can't get the city to do wide bike lanes because they don't think bicycles ride side by side. In addition, they refuse to put bike lanes on State Street. That's ridiculous. They won't even allow bicyclists trying to get families downtown, but they won't allow bicyclists on the sidewalks downtown.
I'm going to take a moderator's prerogative. Just note that State Street is managed and owned by the state, so any changes are somewhat outside of the city's control, aside from the landscaping and peripheral. To move on, and a couple candidates touched on this next question. I'm excited to hear more about it. From the Ballpark Community Council, what will you do to make our city more walkable and to reduce the necessity of a personal vehicle? We'll start with Councilman and we'll come around.
That's my favorite question, Ben. I think that we need to do a lot of things to make our city more walkable. Walkability is if the walk is safe, has utility, and is beautiful. So we need to make sure that we're investing in landscaping, including street trees to allow shade as people are walking. We need to rebuild our sidewalks. We have a lot of cracked sidewalks in the district, and we need to invest in that. And we need to reinvest in our streets, adding bike lanes so that we can, again, get through the city on all modalities. And we also need to invest in our neighborhood business nodes. You need to have somewhere that you want to go that's close enough to entice you to walk. And investing in those neighborhood business nodes, again, along Main Street would do a ton for increasing walking throughout the city. That's not only good for businesses, but it's good for our air quality and it's good for the health of our residents.
Thanks. I love this question as well. I've biked hundreds of miles within this city. I am happiest when I'm on my bike, and I've thought a lot as I'm out cycling on ways that we can make the city better when it comes to biking. And a lot of it is looking from east to west, specifically in the city, and finding major bikeways, because once you've identified those as major bikeways, then you can plan your trip knowing that if you're planning from north to south or east to west or north to south, you're going to be able to know which ways you want to travel and how to plan your route. There have been a lot of cool things that the city's done, the McClellan Trail, the Jordan River Parkway, a lot of the new bike lanes that you've seen that come out of Liberty Park as well. But I think when you add bikeability and walkability, it's so wonderful for our environment. But we also have to think through how will we adapt as drivers and when there are drivers on the road. And I do think Utah drivers have a little bit to learn about bikers, but there are things like decreasing speed limits and making sure the streets are safe for these bikers when we do have these bikeways, and also looking for ways to find routes on streets less traveled that could become major bikeways with the big lanes. Like you've seen on 200 West has a great bike lane, and there's a few other around the city that when you can plan your trip that way, it makes it a lot better. Because I'm out on my bike so often, I feel like I'm equipped to be able to look at the city and handle questions that come up about how and where we put bike lanes and for what reason, and how the effects will have on the streets that we put them in. Thanks.
Go ahead, Vance.
I think it depends on our ability. As you improve one thing like biking and walking, you're also detracting from automobiles. Now, I think that boils down to how you use them. If you're using them for recreational activity, then you shouldn't be using State Street. I don't know how you'd explain it. State Street's like a main artery. Third West is a main artery, but it also runs through a lot of residential area. Except for if you're up north, and that's mostly business area. But as you improve one, you're also taking away from the other one. It's a matter of like priority right now. It's a matter of which one that you need the best.
Thank you. Go ahead, Amy.
All right, I'm a big pedestrian advocate. I'm a wildly dedicated pedestrian. I've got a 10,000 step a day streak going on since May 8th, 2020. So that means I know a lot about what makes a street feel good to walk down and what makes it feel bad. Number one of the things that we need to see is a more equitable way to get pedestrian level lighting in our communities. I have been advocating for this consistently since 2016, and currently there is no way to do it if you live in a renter majority occupied neighborhood. And as we know, the Ballpark community is only 18% owner occupied. There are grants that can support about 50% of the cost to install a street lamp on your property. But if you're a renter, that still means thousands of dollars of costs, and why would you be incentivized to do that? So we need to change policies such that renter majority occupied neighborhoods can install pedestrian level lighting. When it comes to safety at track stations, I'm a big proponent of that. I think some of you know that I've held several anti-violence meetings focused on crime, specifically on 1300 South, both in 2019 and in 2020. And I held that first one in response to when there were 4 homicides in less than 2 blocks in less than a year surrounding 1300 South. I want to be able to feel safe walking to and from my track station. I don't. I really want to make that something that can happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, George.
I'm a big I'm a big proponent of walking and encouraging walkability, and I try to walk a few hours a day. I don't see this city encouraging walkability, and that's a problem. The focus should be on increasing the width of sidewalks, but they don't do that. They keep pushing park strips. In fact, the most egregious example is 9th East project, where they tore out the park strip on both sides and then put them back in. That doesn't make sense. When we're trying to get a wider bike lane, raised bike lane on one side, they put in park strips after tearing it out. It just doesn't make sense. This city has also been trying to do grand boulevards to encourage walkability, like the Champs-Élysées 28-foot wide bike sidewalk. But the city keeps thinking that it makes sense with car lots. If you want to discourage walking, put in block-long car lots. That doesn't encourage walkability. And the city also has a problem with parking. It discourages parking because they want people to get out of their cars. But the reality is, Sugar House is the best example. When we had the ability to park at a parking lot for 3 or 4 hours, we could go to the library, walk the neighborhood. We wouldn't have to go from store to store with a car. We could park and walk. But when you deter parking, you actually deter walkability. When you don't make wider sidewalks and allow car lots, you deter walkability. Those are my comments.
Does anyone care to have a rebuttal? Thank you. Next question from Wasatch Hollow Community Council. Utah and the West are facing a severe drought that may suggest a new normal, even as ongoing population growth increases water demands. What steps do you think the city should take to promote water conservation? And we're back to starting with Sarah, I believe.
Another great question. I was thinking about this the other day because I was thinking how there was this messaging that came from the state about the drought and the dire need and the amount of people that stepped up and had yellow lawns this summer, and how we as a community and as a state, without much regulation, found ways to tackle the drought. But I've seen in other cities, for example, in Denver, they also have found ways to conserve water by designating days that you can water. So if your address ends in an even or your address ends in an odd, you are designated based on your address which days you can water. And they monitor it really well, but generally people just follow those rules. I think there are a few things we can do. One is educating people on the amount of water that you actually need in your yard and in your gardens, and also finding ways to provide residents with some type of kickback for when they buy water healthy plants and drought resistant plants. I think that it will take a while for us to adapt because for so long we've just been watering so heavily, but it's urgent that we try and change because we are slowly dealing with all of these climate crises sitting right in front of us, and we have to change. And it's going to take messaging, communication, education, and then also the idea that I have to change the addresses for days that you can water, I think would help a lot because it sets you on a schedule and keeps it consistent. Thanks.
Go ahead, Vance. Thank you.
You know, looking at it from a law enforcement view, I worked with West Valley Animal Control and ordinance enforcement. And I think what we're trying to hit on the head is it's a give and take situation. Now, our governor has done his part in making the recommendations like for water. Now, if that involves not watering your garden, maybe you put in like landscaping walks, water-wise plants, like what's been mentioned, things like that. I was looking in the newspaper, best way to get information, even though it might not be 100% accurate. And there are some cities that if you try to change your plants, but they don't meet the ordinance, they actually kick it. It's sending conflicting messages. Myself, I just simply didn't water the garden. I've tried to keep the grass mowed because dry grass is burnable. It easily catches fire. But one thing is in different districts or different cities, they send conflicting messages. It's like with the mask requirements as an example, failure of communication, it upsets people. There's a give and take. You get blamed for not caring if you're not wearing a mask. That's what I'm running my campaign on. Did I go over time?
Just right.
Okay. Be
Thanks.
quiet.
Amy, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks. We have some of the cheapest water in the United States, yet we are some of the highest consumers of water. I think the average citizen might use something like 200 gallons a day, which seems like phenomenal if you try to picture it, right? I think we're going to need to talk about restructuring how people pay for water in this city, and big users need to pay more. And I know that's not a comfortable topic for lots of people, but we're going to have to do it. If we're going to talk about actually enforcing watering on certain days, that means that we are probably going to have to increase our civil enforcement staff, because right now I think we have one enforcement officer per district, and they have a whole lot on their plate. Last, the city needs to be a leader in this. They need to xeriscape some of their properties. They need to show that it can be attractive, that it can be done. And we know that they have been offering some incentives to xeriscape park strips, and that's great. But we need to see folks do it and do it well, and do it well in public spaces. Finally, I would like to shout out to Ben Winslow, who reminded us time and time again by supplying us music to let your lawn brown too. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Okay, the city council sets policy for the city. It has an ordinance called the Park Strip Ordinance that requires greenery on park strips. We tried to argue against it years ago when it was passed, but it keeps putting in park strips and requiring park strips to be green. It plants trees in park strips that aren't getting watered, and 75 trees, new trees, died last year. The city council needs to change the park strip ordinance. We're actually doing pretty good in watering, except with park strips. And the city also requires, that requires 30% of the front yard to be green. have plants. Now, if you do water-wise, that's great, but people have lawns, and when they take them out and put in rocks, they're complained about, and zoning goes after them, and our water manager, Stephanie Dewar, goes after them, tries to talk them out of it. This is a problem with the city council policy. The ordinances need to change, and I know Darin cares about this, and I hope he takes it back to the city council, and they change the ordinances. I also need to point out that a lot of times the city wants to prettify the areas like the alleyways, but the city doesn't water the alleyways, and all the plants that we spent $1 million on a few years ago have died. I live on one of those alleyways. The plants all died. $1 million was spent planting plants, and they all died. And that's a problem. We spent a couple of $100,000 in Miller Park. They all died. We don't water what we plant. We shouldn't plant what we don't water. So I'm asking the city council to revisit the ordinances.
Thanks for the question, Ben. One of the, I think, saddest parts for me personally about becoming a council member and then having a pandemic hit is I wasn't able to go on a lot of the tours that city council members usually go on in their first year. But luckily, recently, I was able to go on a tour of the water treatment plant and the sewage treatment plant, and I learned quite a bit about water policy. And I learned a lot of new things. So I want to start with the good news. First of all, my predecessors and the mayor's predecessors have actually made really wise decisions in the past. Salt Lake City is well positioned. We control a large watershed, and we have a very robust and specific water conservation plan. We're currently only in level 1 of that water conservation plan, which is voluntary restrictions. And I want to give you some more good news. Salt Lake City residents have heeded that call. We have significantly reduced our landscaping water this year, and there's no need currently for further restrictions under our current conditions. However, we're going to continue looking at those things. And I think that we have a lot of other policy directions that we can consider as a city. For instance, I think that we should lobby the state to repeal the restriction on reusing gray water in domestic situations. I think that we need to look at our landscaping ordinances. I do not support removing the 30% landscaping requirement. The 30% landscaping requirement, to clarify, does not say you need grass. It just says you need planted material. And I support that because that reduces urban heat island, cleans our air, and makes our city more beautiful. So I don't support repealing that, but I do support looking at things like potentially allowing for artificial turf in some areas. And I support looking at additional restrictions on the that would help protect our watershed. So we as a city, we need to protect the watershed in the Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood canyons because that's where our water comes from. Thank you.
Anybody care to comment further? Excellent. This comes from the Wasatch Hollow Community Council. Public parks are an essential amenity in Salt Lake City. Please share your opinions on the adequacy of the park system, the city park system, in regards to park space, park operations and maintenance, and enforcement of park rules. We'll start with Vance Hansen and go around to Sarah Reale.
Well, looking at it from a law enforcement view, parks need to be patrolled. Now, whether you use actual law enforcement, contract it to security, or whatever, people say security, there's some, is not acceptable. Now, when I say you need to go back to the past, in the past, they've actually been sworn in by either the mayor or another government entity as law enforcement officers, but their law enforcement powers are limited to the park. Now, that's a matter of communication, but that's the way it has been in the past, and how they got around what I say, hiring different levels of officers. But again, when people mention the word lawsuit, they lose their minds. That's about all I got to say on that.
Thank you. Amy, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I agree with Vance. This actually does go back to policing. I think a lot of you are aware that there were 3 shootings in Liberty Park this summer, one of them fatal. And I strongly support park patrols and folks who are dedicated to our parks. We have lots of them, but unfortunately, we just don't have the manpower right now, right? Lots of those officers are just pulled for general patrolling and calls because of our very long queues. And that's a fair decision right now. We're in crisis mode when it comes to policing in our city. I don't know how to solve that problem beyond the ways that we've already talked about. We need to make our police force more welcoming such that folks might consider returning. And salaries weren't enough. We're going to have to change our attitude towards police and going to understand that they are part of the big project in this city, which is that we all want to live together and be healthy and safe and thrive. They're not our enemies. I'm sorry that it seems like for a while people thought they were. Do we have adequate green space in all parts of District 5? Heck no, absolutely not. But a lot of us are afraid to ask for more green space because we're afraid that that's going to invite more camping and therefore more crime in our communities. We have a tiny little ballpark playground. We love it. People advocated for its name to be changed and for it to get more bark, but I know people are afraid of what might happen to it, especially if it was expanded. Liberty Park, crown jewel of the city. Can't tell you how many times I've gone around it. Thousands? Thanks to SLC Running Company, big fan. I wish this wasn't about policing so much. I'm afraid it is. Thanks.
Okay, yes, we need more parks. We're trying to get the Fleet Block to become a park. Unfortunately, the city keeps spending money on Pioneer Park. You know, the solution the city came up with in Pioneer Park was to remove the restrooms. It didn't really help, but that's what they tried. So I know Wasatch Hollow Park very well. We're having a problem with 3 a.m. Parties, drug parties down there. And yes, we need more park patrols. Unfortunately, the bike patrols, which August 26th went down Wasatch Hollow, they stop, unfortunately, at midnight. That's a problem. We need more park patrols. That's bottom line, but we don't have the cops to do it. And we've tried to get the retention and sign-on bonus for those cops that have experience, but we can't get it through the city council. And that's a problem. How about over the parks? The police department has to close the restrooms at night because it's so unsafe in parks at night. That's a problem. That should be addressed. And the best way to address it is with walking police patrols. The Pioneer Park Coalition has been begging for them for years. We need more greenery. And by the way, we also need to water what we have because a few years ago, the city stopped watering 30% of Bonneville Golf Course and the cemetery and the trees and the medians. So we need to recognize we have to maintain what we plant in parks. I encourage the city council to prioritize more walking police patrols in parks. They shouldn't have to beg for overtime to do that.
The answer to the question of do we have enough parks and do we maintain them is unfortunately no. We don't have enough green space in the city, and unfortunately we haven't done a great job of maintaining them. Actually, one of the biggest fights that I had on the city council was whether or not we were going to expand the role of the Parks Department. It was a 4-3 split vote, and I was proud to support the expansion of more staff and more funding for our Parks Department, and actually creating it as a standalone city department. Previously, it was a division housed under Public Services, and we now have our own Parks and Public Lands Department. And it was important to me to support that because we have unfortunately not done a great job of maintaining our parks in the past. That department houses the Parks Department, golf, trails, and natural lands, as well as the urban forestry. And so those are all the important spaces that are the lungs of our city and help our city breathe and create clean air. I think that we need to expand the role of that, or at least consider expanding the role of that department to also add recreational services within the park. The more we have people in the park kids playing soccer tournaments or things like that, the safer the parks will be. The more we use the parks, the safer they will be. I was also proud to support the purchase of Allen Park. I know that there's a severe question of east-west equity with our green spaces, but that was a option that we had to purchase a great asset within the eastern part of the city, just outside of District 5, and I was proud to support that because, frankly, we do need more parks in the city. As our population grows, we need more places for people to recreate, and we need those to be safe. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that right now we appreciate green space more than we ever have before, which is good news because that means more people supporting parks and open spaces. I'm on the Salt Lake County Open Spaces Board, so I understand the complexities of managing these parks and also all the thought that goes into where they are and how they are going to look, what they're going to look like. I'm a big fan of open spaces and the benefits of parks. I think that they not only environmentally, but they have opportunities for community gathering and togetherness and joining together and finding spaces to be outside and enjoy the outdoors. There are definitely plenty of opportunities for more green space within our city. I've appreciated a lot of the surveys that the Salt Lake City Parks Department has sent out in regards to parks, asking for input from city members, and I encourage all of you to go take those surveys and use your voice in inputting on the development and thought process on these parks. I think they've been really great. I also think a lot of it, when it comes to the maintenance and the park rules, comes down to community responsibility. Everything from poop bags for your dogs to cleaning up the park. It can be something that as a community we can all contribute to as well, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We could also consider community ambassadors as another way of trying to monitor the park. The question about the camps and how to manage the camps within the park is part of that complex issue with unsheltered population. And the reality comes down to we just really need to focus on our spaces that we have and finding ways to help keep them green and friendly and finding ways that as a community we can come together to keep them that way.
Anyone care to comment further?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I really wanted to comment on the idea of the more we use the parks, the safer they'll be. Unfortunately, when we think about when some of the most scary violent crimes have happened, in Liberty Park, for example, they've been in the middle of the and when the park was full of families. The fatal shooting happened on July 4th weekend in the middle of the afternoon, and our most recent shooting, I think, was on a Sunday afternoon. For us to displace crime in those parks, this can't be a matter of pushing it back to neighborhood watch groups.
I'll respond to that, Ben.
Let's go, Sarah, and then we'll go to you, Councilman.
Yeah, I appreciate all of the work that has been done with the Ballpark Community Council in regards to safety, and I really like to, the question was about public parks, the space, the operation, the maintenance, and the park rules, and I'm a glass half full type of person, and I like to think of opportunities and ways that we can come together for a community, but in no way am I disregarding all of the crime and things that have happened. There are laws and rules that we need to follow, and we need to, going back to the police question, increase the amount of staff and services that we have. But overall, when we're talking about parks, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
And Councilman?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, no, I agree. We need to increase police presence, and we also need to look at the civilian response model as potentially applying to the park. But Amy, I want to say that this rhetoric that Salt Lake City is dangerous and this focus on only looking at the negative things does not connect with the residents of District 5. I have been talking to people all year long, and the people that I talk to on doorsteps want more investment in the park. They want us to create more programs and more programming within the parks. And they want us to look at positive solutions, not only looking at the negative things that are happening.
Amy, do you care to take any more time? And then we'll move on.
Sure, thank you. I think I'm one of the most physically active folks when it comes to spending time on our sidewalks and going around and around and around our park. Holy moly, I am one of the biggest proponents of how wonderful Liberty Park and our other public spaces are. I just want them to be safer. And I don't think that's a crime. Sorry for that pun.
Excellent. We'll do one more question, I assume, and then we'll probably have to do our closing statements. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. This one comes from me. This year, for the first time, Salt Lake City residents will elect its city council through ranked choice voting, in which votes for losing candidates are redistributed by order of a voter's preference. This method of voting eliminates the need for a primary, saving taxpayer dollars, and it ensures that a consensus candidate is elected. If your campaign were to be unsuccessful, to which of your fellow candidates would you prefer to see your votes redistributed to? And we will start with Amy Hawkins.
I literally cannot imagine a more interesting world where George Chapman sits on our city council. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Amy. George, go ahead.
Okay. Amy Hawkins took a Ballpark Community Council that was literally fighting with themselves and focused it on what was really important almost immediately with a snap of her fingers. I was impressed. I've been watching community councils, many community councils throughout the city for almost 10 years, and Amy has been exceptional at providing the real leadership needed by the community to focus on public safety, the biggest negative impact in Ballpark. And I also know Amy has excelled at everything she's decided to excel at, especially, I've had a lot of experience. And Amy's PhD is one of the most difficult PhDs you can imagine, and she has a PhD in that. And every other PhD I've worked with has been exceptional. So Amy Hawkins would be my second choice.
Thank you, George. Go ahead, Councilman.
Ben, what a weird question.
Is it?
I know the answer, and my second choice is going to be Sarah Reale this year. I think Sarah has been working very hard to connect with the constituents all year long. It's been fun to be alongside her on the campaign trail this whole year. And have a lot of conversations about District 5 and a lot of conversations about Salt Lake City. And I believe that she has the vision that I see, that Salt Lake City has a bright, positive future, and that if we just invest in our neighborhoods and our communities and our parks and our streets and our trails, that we will be able to realize that bright, positive future. And so Sarah's going to have my second choice this year.
Thanks, Darin. I'm really excited about ranked choice voting, just so I can geek out. I teach intro to political science at the college, and I tell my students about this, and it's really great for voters, and that's why I love it the most. So I'm really happy that the city has turned to ranked choice voting, and I think it's going to be a really interesting experience. I have to say that based on this being my first time campaigning and running for office, I just applaud all of you for the work and time you've put in, because it has been outstanding, and it's a lot of work, and hopefully my girlfriend still likes me after this is all over. I want to say that I have been really impressed by Darin and all of the work that he's done. And I think that if given more time, because I do feel bad for him being put in right at the beginning of a pandemic and having to deal with a hurricane, an inland hurricane, and an earthquake and a pandemic all at once, right as you start in office, is a little unfair. I almost feel bad about running for that reason alone. But Darin would take my second pick if I have to pick, but I have to say it's really hard, and I think that everyone, and I really appreciate Amy as well, all the work that she's done on the Ballpark Community Council, because that's the neighborhood that I live in, and we wouldn't be where we are today without her as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
A really wild question. Thank you.
And Vance, go ahead.
Well, I'm rather old-fashioned. Some people might call it conservative. I didn't even know what left and right meant until somebody called me up and threatened me the first time I ran for office, which is the same position I'm running for now. That's a way of saying you could be ignorant in a good way. You're just not aware of the situation or the terminology. And then the second definition for ignorant is being a smart aleck. I'm right. I just don't feel comfortable with the ranked choice voting. But if it's a new experience, I believe that it's an option, but I don't believe it's going to take down the goals what it's been advertised on. But my second choice, using it, since it's going to be implemented anyhow, whether people like it or not, would be George Chapman.
All right. No rebuttals on that one. In our closing minutes here, we'll have our closing statements from the candidates. We'll start with Councilman Mano and go in reverse order from how we started. That'll be the end, so I'll just say thank you now. And Councilman, finish this off.
Thanks, Ben. As I've been knocking doors all year, I've heard how much residents in this district love their city and how hopeful they are for our future. The kindness and character that my grandparents found here still exists. I'm the best candidate up here because I know what it takes to do this job. I understand the role of the city council and have built strong relationships with my council colleagues and the mayor, and I will use those relationships to get things done. My career as an architect has also prepared me for this role. Architects have to approach every project from multiple angles. We have to balance the client's wants and needs with their budget. We have to look at the engineering that keeps the building up and also the aesthetics that make it beautiful. And we have to manage a team of clients, contractors, and engineers to keep everybody focused on a common goal. I approach city council the same way. I learn about the issues, meet the people that are affected, and balance competing priorities to create the best policy solutions. I have a deep understanding of zoning and land use policy, which will help me lead Salt Lake City to a more walkable, bikeable, sustainable, and affordable future. I'm not here because I want to gain more social media followers or get myself in the news. I'm here to listen to my neighbors and represent their voice. I'm here to make our community stronger and more tight-knit, not tear it apart. And I'm here to do the work that needs to be done to make Salt Lake City the place where urban design nerds like me will visit, study, and wonder how the heck we did that. I would be honored to be the first choice on your ballot this year. Visit my website, darinmano.com, to learn more about me or connect with my campaign. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, visit my campaign website at georgechapman.net to learn more about me or my campaign. But I'm running again because I want more public safety in the city, and my city council doesn't seem to agree with that. When we ask for walking police patrols, because we need a uniformed cop to discourage the drug use and drug dealing in the parks. Our city council says, we need a non-uniform or maybe civilian solution, and that doesn't make sense. The Downtown Ambassadors program is not a good substitute for a police officer, and we need a couple of hundred more cops. Even the chief of police, I remind you, June 1st said we were down 120 cops that we don't have for 911 calls. That's serious. That's really, really bad. That's led to a significant increase in homicides in our area. That shouldn't have happened. The best deterrent to crime is a visible police officer. And unfortunately, because of what the police officers think of the city council, they're leaving. Respected. Because this city council doesn't seem to respect them. They seem to be thinking that the bad guys should be left alone. So I'm encouraging you to remember the best way to make our city more livable, to make our city better managed and convenient for living in, is to have more police officers and public safety. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, George. My name is Amy J. Hawkins, and I picked Salt Lake City 10 years ago because I was just flabbergasted by its beauty. I first laid eyes on it on November 30th, 2010, and I was just astonished. I'd never seen mountains like that before in my life. I saw the public library. a temple to literacy. And I knew this is where I wanted to spend my next few years. And I still want to spend my next few years here. And I want to spend my next few after that. I am betting on Salt Lake City, and I am betting on the Ballpark community, even with its flaws. I think it's a shame that asking for improved public safety is being portrayed as divisive. Our average number of homicides in our district is 2 a year, and last year we had 7. That's a 250% increase. We had a 61.8% increase in violent crime overall, and that's damaging to the families and small businesses that call our community home. I've got a proven track record of policy, fighting addiction, hundreds of thousands of dollars for bike and sidewalk improvements, and thousands of hours of volunteering for our community to try to make dialogue happen, because that's the best part, is the dialogue and the coming together and the learning from each other. And that's what's happened here tonight. Thank you, Jason Stevenson, and thank you for others for making this opportunity available for us. If you want to learn more about me, you can also go to my website, amyjhawkins.com. But I hope I can have a conversation with you personally and talk to you about why I want to see more scientists at every level of government, including me. Thank you.
Vance, go ahead, your closing statement.
Well, I was born and raised in Salt Lake. I do come from a military family, both officially and unofficially. Unofficially is from my grandmother's side. That's serving like National Guard. Now, I found out recently that a lot of my not recently, I've been raised, but as I find them in what they call ancestral history or genealogy, I found out that a lot of them have been in law enforcement, but it's the dishonesty of certain people for whatever reason, they're not on the list. My grandmother was a licensed school teacher. This is out of District 5's territory, but she wasn't recognized because the state or somebody on the higher up ladder wouldn't accept a copy of her certifications, or the certifications were lost. It's the same with me. I hold certifications in as a foster parent, as a like deputy constable. You try looking me up on the internet or any of the official records, you won't find me. Or if you do, I'm mismentioned. And if it's happening to me, it's happening to a heck of a lot of other people, whether they're teachers or working in the government or whatever. I look at this as an education, and I'm only going to get better if I'm allowed the opportunity to serve. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Thank you again, everyone who put this on and helped organize this. I really appreciate it. And I love if anyone joined via Zoom, it makes me happy as a government teacher. A few things you should know about me. I'm a connector. I love to bring people together and connect them in common interests and goals. I sincerely love collaboration. I want to work with you together as your advocate, taking your voice to the city. You should also know public service for me isn't just a title, it's a value. My mom, who's here in the back row, is a teacher. My sister, probably on Zoom, also a teacher. And I've spent my career in higher education. I've spent 15 years communicating to students, their parents, alumni, legislators, and the community to help them navigate and contribute to higher education and ultimately to the city that we live in. In many ways, Salt Lake Community College is a lot like a small city, connected in every sector across the county. As a leader and educator at the college, I've helped launch new initiatives, communicate changes, and work with partners in everything from athletics to workforce to create positive change for our students and those we support. In fostering the most diverse student population in the state, I've put justice, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility at the forefront of every decision I make. I have a proven track record of collaborating, connecting, and advocating for change that support this city. But this isn't about me, this is about you. And my biggest goal is to represent you, your voice. And I'll do that through communication, transparency, and re-engaging the community because your voices are important. And together we can keep Salt Lake City the wonderful place that it is. So it's time to get real. I hope you'll join me. Thanks.
Thank you all. Let's get a round of applause for the candidates.